3 weeks after the new neighbor moved in and told me my grandfather's fence was ugly, and yes, she actually said time to update Sweetie like she owned the air, my mailbox held a $50 HOA violation and a very clear message. Welcome to suburbia, where history gets emailed to death. I'm Trevor Stonefield, 45, born next to a quarry, raised on measuring twice and cutting once, and I thought I understood what community meant until a retired principal with a Lexus and a grudge decided otherwise. We'd owned that 2-acre parcel since Carter was president. The fence was my grandfather's work from 1983, cedar posts set deeper than code, weathered to that silver gray only mountain sun and snow can make. It leaned a little like old things lean toward surviving, but it was sound, solid, honest. Delilah Pritchard wanted the mountain view without the smell of diesel, the charm without the work, and apparently the power to rewrite a family's history before coffee. She walked my fence line in designer sneakers, taking pictures like evidence fingers running along cedar like they could read imperfect souls. 3 weeks after she moved in, 3 envelopes arrived. First HOA violation, aesthetic deterioration, screamed the header. My grandfather's craftsmanship reduced to municipal buzzwords. 2 days later, an inspector from the county, and suddenly my everyday life at the quarry was a public safety hazard. Then came the environmental complaints. Animal control calls the fire marshal, each one a needle prick designed to make me sell, move, or break. There's a certain rhythm to working stone that trains you for patience, but bureaucracy moves differently, methodically, like a school principal building a case. Delilah had the patience and the posture for that kind of politics. She'd spent 30 years telling people what to do, and here she was applying those skills to my property. I'll admit I felt that old, hot, metallic anger, the one that shows up when something feels stolen, but my father taught me a better trick: paperwork fights paperwork. So I went to the courthouse, to the thin-lipped records clerk whose wire-rimmed glasses had seen every neighbor wore, and I dug. Turns out the outlaw in this story wasn't the elderly fence that kept cattle in, it was the developer's dream, and Delilah was a very expensive agent. My grandfather's permits were yellowed, stamped by a county inspector named Bull Henderson, posts set 18 inches deeper than required, his note said. And my property had been grandfathered when the surrounding land sold off to developers. Even better, my deed extended 3 feet further east than the fence. 3 little feet that meant the cedar line sat entirely inside my land. 3 feet that suddenly looked like a loophole with teeth. While I was piecing that together, Delilah was ramping up. She'd created an HOA Aesthetic Standards Committee, which she promptly staffed, posted a neighborhood watch on Facebook, and made a video about industrial eyesores that cleverly framed maintenance and honest labor as community ruin. Neighbors who once borrowed sugar from my dad's shed began to look at my quarry like it was a pollutant. Allegations arrived like clockwork. Noise, dust, contamination. Phantom problems for real people who suddenly had selective memory about who'd helped them put in barns and fix roofs for decades. Then a developer named Rick Brennan rolled in smooth and shiny and altogether too confident. "We can make you comfortable," he said. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you his tablet might as well have had a conveyor belt for cash on it. His developer friends had options on surrounding lots. Everything hinged on assembling land for 200 homes. My quarry, I realized, wasn't a scenic blemish in their eyes. It was the keystone. If they could pressure me into selling, they'd cash out. If not, they could make life miserable until I gave up. This is where the plot turned, because I'm stubborn, and because the county records and one very old neighbor named Mrs. Jordan proved more dangerous to their plan than any board meeting. Mrs. Jordan is 80, quick as a whip, and has perfected the art of being underestimated. She'd been watching from her porch, asking questions at the post office, piecing together public records while everyone assumed she was just feeding stray cats. She brought me photocopies, mortgage documents showing Delilah's balloon payment resetting in 8 months, credit card debt from renovations, and a business filing, Mountain Vista Community Consulting, with Delilah listed as a paid residential acquisition specialist. That's the twist. The friendly neighbor who brought petitions turns out to have a contractor's business card. She wasn't defending property values. She was earning a living destabilizing them. The HOA complaints were the tools, the Facebook group, the megaphone, and the developer, the scapegoat for every upset backyard barbecue. With legal protection in hand, grandfathered exemptions and agricultural zoning that let me legally erect an 8-foot barrier, If I wanted, I stopped playing defense and started designing something permanent. You don't beat pressure by being nicer, you beat it by making the offense irresistible and indestructible. So we made a plan that was part geology, part theater. My cousin Jake and I mapped out a wall, 7 feet tall, 200 feet long, and cut from the very granite my family hauled from that mountain. We called Miguel with his concrete truck, and Mrs. Jordan organized volunteers like she was running a school bake sale, but with heavy equipment. To make it airtight in more ways than one, we bought 3 Nigerian dwarf goats and 2 sheep, small animals, minimal upkeep, maximum legal shielding under right-to-farm statutes. Goats are cute, bureaucrats are not. Agricultural exemptions trump HOA gripes, and goats steal press narratives. The first concrete pour sent a different kind of message. Miguel's mixer sounded like distant thunder. The foundation went down 3 feet deep rebar like a spine. Delilah went ballistic, certified letters, threats, and then escalation into sabotage. One night, security cameras caught someone prying apart our wooden forms with a crowbar, dumping used oil in the excavation. That crossed a line. Criminal mischief doesn't look good at a town meeting. Mountain Vista's next move was subtlety, and then blunt bribe. Brennan came back this time with a suit and 2 serious-looking men offering to double his last offer if I'd simply stop building. It's funny what money smells like when it's offered as a bribe, the same way a bad apology smells like desperation. I told him no. He made veiled threats about making life uncomfortable. I made calls to my lawyer and to the local paper. And then the community, the real community, not the one being fed, a campaign by a paid consultant, showed up. Mrs. Jordan handed Channel 7 documents proving Delilah's paid relationship with Mountain Vista. My lawyer presented security footage of sabotage. Neighbors who had been duped apologized sheepishly, explaining they were sold a narrative instead of facts. The HOA meeting that used to be a sleepy monthly obligation turned into a courtroom, and Delilah watched as her credibility crumbled with every piece of evidence. When the vote came, the count wasn't close. The board expelled her for conduct detrimental to community interests. The developer's acquisition contracts unraveled under investigative pressure. Media attention led to inquiries into their tactics. Delilah's balloon payment hit, foreclosure notices appeared, and in a couple of months she was gone, Lexus and all. The house sold at a loss. The developer walked away from the subdivision plan. My wall stood complete, solid as a rebuttal. The goats did what goats do. They stole every last sympathetic headline from Delilah. Kids came by with carrots. Neighbors brought sandwiches to the crew. The community center asked me to design a memorial garden out of the same granite we used for the wall. Unexpectedly, the quarry saw a spike in work because everyone suddenly remembered the value of handcrafted, long-lasting materials. So what's the moral here? Don't take the easy answer. Look for the history buried in paperwork, and sometimes the strongest defense is building something worth defending. My grandfather taught me that good work outlasts rhetoric measured twice cut once, but the deeper lesson was about legitimacy when someone tries to weaponize bureaucracy. The remedy isn't always a lawsuit. It can be to create something permanent to alter the facts on the ground until their strategy no longer fits the map. And maybe most important, people underestimate the quiet power of slow, steady work and of an 80-year-old neighbor who knows where the records are kept. The end felt like a small, satisfying justice. Delilah lost her role, her reputation, and eventually the house that financed her campaign. Mountain Vista's tactics were exposed, the neighborhood healed. But the best part was simpler. Every morning I drink coffee and watch sunlight slide across 7 feet of fitted granite, and I think about how permanence can be a kind of justice. The goats bleat, kids laugh, neighbors drop off apples. The wall protects what matters, and it reminds everyone why we ought to value what was here before development got a meeting room. So here's the question I'll leave you with, and it's a hot one. When does fighting back become the same thing as the thing you're fighting? Is an 8-foot granite wall retaliation, protection, or both? And at what point does defense cross into needless escalation? Tell me, did Trevor go too far, or did he save something worth saving? Drop your story about HOA fights, corporate pressure, or a neighbor who crossed the line. Tag your state, tell us what you did, and if you think some problems need permanent answers, hit like, subscribe for more, and share this with someone who's been bullied by bureaucracy.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.